So welcome to this Dharma talk. Tonight I'd like to talk about understanding dukkha. Understanding dukkha. And there's a number of ways we can understand dukkha. One way we can understand dukkha is as the first noble truth. And in Buddhism, there's four noble truths or four realities to life, and these realities form the framework of the whole of the teachings. And these realities are that there is the reality of unsatisfactoriness, there is the reality of dukkha, there is the reality of suffering at all different types of levels. The second truth is that this dukkha, which is a reality for all of us, has a cause. The causes are not necessarily things that happen out there in the world, but they are the way we relate to events that arise in our lives. If we relate to things with a sense of grasping after, with greed, pushing away with hatred, or pushing away with strong aversion, rejecting and condemning. And if we relate to things in a way where we don't see the reality of it, we're sort of deluded about what's happening. We're caught up in ignorance. Ignorance is an interesting word. It's like ignoring the way things actually are. If we relate to experience in that way, that causes us suffering. The third truth is that there is the possibility of freedom from dukkha. There is the possibility of, when we don't engage in greed, ignorance and hatred, then we don't have the results of those tendencies of mind, and we discover freedom from dukkha, which is, in Pali it's called nibbana, in Sanskrit it's called nirvana, and this is the reality of, it's actually one way we can describe nibbana is the reality of non-clinging. We don't cling to anything, we don't have the causes of suffering, so we have freedom from suffering. And the fourth truth is the practice of the path. The path is essentially ethics, or in Pali it's called sila, the cultivation of the mind, which is called meditation, and wisdom. The Eightfold Path. There are three components: ethics, meditation, and wisdom. And ethics provides the foundation of blamelessness, of our clear conscience, a good heart, a kind heart. Samadhi is samadhi or meditation is the cultivation of the mind. And it comprises of basically calming the mind, stilling the mind, quietening the mind, so we can see clearly. That quietening and stilling of the mind is called shamatha, or serenity, or calm, or tranquility. And then with that tranquility and clarity of mind, the stillness of mind, we see deeply into phenomena, see deeply into the nature of ourselves, see deeply into the reality of the world, see deeply into Dharma, and that's called vipassana, or insight. And when we do that, we cultivate wisdom. And wisdom here refers to many things, but essentially it's being able to see the way things are, understand causes and conditions, and act in ways that are in alignment with the way things actually are, and the reduction of suffering. So that's the path. The Eightfold Path goes something like right view, right intention, which is the wisdom component, right action, right speech, right livelihood, which is the ethics component, and right effort or energy, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which is the mental development component, the meditation component. So coming back to the First Noble Truth, dukkha. There's, I'm talking about dukkha because I've had some strong personal experience with dukkha in the last 5 or 6 weeks. And there's 3 types of dukkha. The first type of dukkha is called Dukkha-Dukkha. It's like the plain, simple fact of suffering. I was a monk once upon a time, and I learned how to chant quite a few chants. And in these chants, sometimes the chants would talk about what dukkha is. And in the first Dharma discourse that the Buddha provided, it was called the turning of the wheel of Dhamma. What was it? Is that what I think that's what it's called. The turning of the wheel of Dhamma. And in it, he described the 4 truths and the Eightfold Path. And when it came to dukkha, he said birth, aging, sickness, and death is dukkha. Pain, grief, lamentation, and despair is dukkha. And when we talk about pain, we talk about both physical and emotional pain, mental pain, torment. Getting what you don't want, not getting what you want, and being parted from that which is dear to you is dukkha. In fact, and I'll explain this a little bit later, clinging to the 5 aggregates that we relate to what we call a self is dukkha. The 5 aggregates, and I'll explain this in more detail a bit later, the 5 aggregates are form, which is body, feeling tone, which is the experiences of the hedonic experiences of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or neither that arise from the body and mind. Form, feelings, perceptions, which is the way we recognize things. It's conceptualizing about something, like what I was talking about earlier. I'm here in this room and I'm seeing with my senses, and I'm saying, room, this is a room. That perception is mind. It's an aspect of mind, and it's an aspect of what we call ourselves. Form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations or mental creations are thinking. They're a volitional aspect of the mind, our lives. Like we create a whole world with our mind. And the last khandha, they're called khandha aggregates. Khandha or skandha in Sanskrit, khandha in Pali. The last one is consciousness, which is the knowing of experience. What we do is we bring these changing experiences together and we create a self out of them. So that's an aspect of dukkha. So coming to these various types of dukkha, the first one I mentioned was Dukkha-Dukkha, and that involves some of those aspects of dukkha that I described that's in the chant. It includes physical discomfort, illness, it includes death, it includes the grief we have when we lose someone we love, for example. These types of obvious suffering. And it includes the reality of physical pain. And recently I went on an example of this, I'm going to give a personal example of this. Recently I went on a self-retreat. I usually do a self-retreat every year, usually about 4 weeks, 5 weeks or something like that. And I go down to Meadowbath. The last 4 years I've been going down to Meadowbath, or 5 years. 4 or 5 years I've been going down to Meadowbath in Blue Mountain Insight Meditation Centre. And I just sit there by myself, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the time to be in solitude and to cultivate meditation. So this year I went down, I had a few stops and starts because I had to come back from my dog who was unwell, had to care for him, but I eventually went back down, probably the first week of July. And the first 5 days were great. My intention was to practice serenity and insight. The first 4 days I kind of set out a schedule for myself. I was going to meditate at least 5 to 6 hours a day, maybe 8 hours a day sometimes. And I started meditating, and I was meditating 2-hour periods. I'd sit for 2 hours at a time. I'd get up, do some movement, maybe do some walking, and I'd come back and do another 2 hours. So throughout the day, there was a significant amount of meditation. Then on the 6th day, it was great. I was going really well. Oh, this is wonderful. And on the 6th day, I woke up and there was agony. I had physical agony. And I went to sit. I couldn't sit. I couldn't sit without extreme pain in my neck. And I went to walk, and I could only had more pain when I was walking. I lie down, it was painful. No matter what I did, it was painful. So I kind of hung out with it for a bit, and then I eventually went to a physiotherapist, and he said, "You've got your vertebrae jammed. There's some vertebrae jammed." And so I thought, well, I'll sit with this. I've sat the path of pain many years ago. When I was practicing with Sayadaw U Janaka, who's of the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, I had a lot of pain. I sat in Burma, and I sat in Australia with him three retreats in Australia. And I remember I used to go to see him, and he said, "Report your experience, Yogi." And I would say, "Sayadaw, I'm having pain. Pain in my back, pain in my knees." And he would say, "Fantastic. Pain is the key to the door of Nibbana." And in those days, I was a bit younger than I am now. It was probably about 30 years ago, something like that, in the 90s. I went to Burma and I sat for about 6 weeks. And it was really intense. I mostly focused on pain. And I must admit, I could have the concentration to focus on the sensations and differentiate painful feeling tone or unpleasant feeling tone from sensations. I could see it was just Vedana. And Vedana was feeling tone. I was reacting to the feeling tone. And if I could see the feeling tone as impermanent and not who I was, there was freedom in that. But in the last, 20 years, I've done the path of serenity. And that's a path of very pleasant meditations. You get experiences like joy and happiness. And I've enjoyed that path because I think it turbocharges the insight practice. So I'm used to meditating and feeling pleasant. So here I am struggling. And I was on this retreat, I couldn't focus. I couldn't kind of penetrate phenomena like I was 30 years ago. And I was feeling overwhelmed, disheartened, frustrated. And I decided, this is ridiculous. I'm coming home. I'm coming home to get an assessment of what's going on here and get proper treatment. So I came home, I got an MRI eventually, and the MRI came back with there's spurs, there's growths in my spine, in my cervical spine, at various junctures. The cervical discs, the discs between the cervical vertebrae have narrowed, and there's some bulging on the right side. So I'm seeing an osteopath now, and I'm seeing a physiotherapist, and I'm trying to get back into being able to sit without pain, being able to drive without pain, being able to ride my bicycle without pain. All these things that I really love doing, especially sitting in meditation. And what I'm realizing is that I have to let go. And I have to let go of whatever I'm clinging to. And the other thing I'm realizing is there's something called the second arrow experience. And the second arrow experience is where you'll have a first arrow, which is inevitable pain, inevitable suffering, which is, it's like this in my neck. The second arrow is what we put onto it, what we add to it, the stories we put onto it. And I'm realizing that I have a lot of clinging, and I have a lot of stories, and I like to think that, I'm a psychologist, I can see people and listen to what they're saying, But I was really worried about it. I was worried I wouldn't be able to work because the pain was so strong that I'm concentrating on that. I'm also a Dharma teacher. I run retreats, and I've got some retreats scheduled. How am I going to sit around with this pain, talk Dhamma? So this story making. And how am I going to get around? I usually ride everywhere. How am I going to do that? I can't do that because whenever I hold on the bike, I lift my head. It's to the right and to the back, and so if I lift my head, I get pain. Sitting at the computer, I'm trying to write a book, but I can't write anything at the moment. I wrote this Dhamma talk using AI. I dictated it into one AI, and then I put it into another AI. The dictation was about 4,000 words, and I said, make this less than 2,000 words. So it wrote my Dhamma talk for me. I put it into another AI, and I got a Dhamma talk and summarised it. So I've noticed that the more you add to it, the worse it gets. So that's the first type of dukkha, Dukkha-Dukkha. The second type of dukkha it's called the dukkha of change. And this encompasses, what I was talking about before, getting what we don't want, not getting what we want, and being parted from what is dear to us. The dukkha of change, it's like, I often refer to chocolate here in this room when I'm giving Dhamma talks. It's like when you're having a piece of chocolate and it's really, really nice, and you taste it, and then the taste sensation disappears. That's dukkha. If you're clinging to it, it is dukkha. If you're not clinging to it, it's not dukkha. It's like when you're used to meditating and having kind of pleasure, spiritual pleasure. Even though it's spiritual pleasure, you're used to that, and when you sit and meditate, all you got is pain. That's the dukkha of getting what you don't want. And it's like being able to ride your bike everywhere because it's great, it's enjoyable, and it's very convenient rather than having to park cars everywhere, and no longer being able to do it. The dukkha of change. I gave me a couple of other examples. I'll see what it said. Here's another one. I gave a Dhamma talk. Did I give a Dhamma talk here on the five recollections, the problems with aging? I probably have somewhere. I turned 70 at the beginning of this year. And I've cut back on work a lot. And it's kind of interesting, the vigor of youth is fading. Also this sense of identity, I identified with it as being a clinical psychologist. And now I'm not, that's not happening much these days. Nobody's emailing me or anything. I've virtually closed my books. Nothing's happening. I get up in the day and what am I going to do today? This kind of change of identity, growing old, being unable to do the things I used to do. I've got a bunch of work I want to do at home, but I just can't do it. And I'm thinking, now I understand why people get helpers in to do the garden and do all the rest of it, because we're just unable to do it. That's the second type of suffering, or second type of dukkha. And the third type of dukkha is the suffering of conditioned existence. Meaning that because everything that arises in life, and our very life, our self, is conditioned. The self arises because of causes and conditions. Our mum and dad meet, for example, and have sex, and there's some causes and conditions for a growth of a child in my mother's belly, or a mother's belly, and so on and so forth. Uterus, I should say, not belly, but uterus. Everything is dependent on causes and conditions. Everything is conditional. And what arises out of this are these 5 khandha, these 5 aggregates that we call ourselves. These aggregates are impermanent. They change. But they are also conditional. They rise because of conditions and they change because of conditions. So this very conditional nature and clinging to this idea that these various disparate experiences that we call form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations and consciousness, that we call ourselves, is constantly changing. It's constantly unreliable. That in itself is unsatisfactory. It's dukkha, unreliable. Hence, that last, how I spoke the chant before, I said, clinging to the khandha, the aggregates as who and what we are, as a lasting self, identifying with it. That's innately dukkha. Am I going all right for time? How long have I been speaking for? About 20 minutes? Half an hour? Oh, really? I better wind up. Okay, so the good thing is that there is the possibility of liberation. There's the possibility of freedom. And I spoke earlier about this second arrow aspect of suffering. If we can see first, for example, physical pain as physical pain, and we don't have resistance to it, if we can see it as unpleasant feelings and we don't resist it, we open to it, we let go of our aversion to it, it's possible to be free from the suffering. And if we can live a life of ethics, mental cultivation and wisdom, which is the Eightfold Path, we can also find freedom in dukkha. Something I noticed the other day, walking in pain, and I thought, walking's better than sitting still because at least it changes a lot, changes around. And I noticed joy arise despite the pain. One can be happy despite having physical pain. I mean, it didn't last, of course, but it was an experience of freedom within the pain. And ultimately, the experience of Nibbana is freedom from dukkha. And there's lots we could talk about Nibbana, but one way I think about it, it's like there's no footing for the five khandha. They don't grab onto anything. It's a consciousness, if you could talk about consciousness, it's a consciousness that is unconditional, if that makes sense. It is the unconditioned. It doesn't arise and it doesn't change. It's beyond the language and the conceptual concepts that we call the world, samsara. So I hope that helps to understand dukkha. And the first step we do with the Four Noble Truths actually is understanding dukkha, which leads on to the second truth. And with the second truth, we let go of the clinging. Then we have the third truth where we realize the third truth, which is Nibbana, and then we live it. Thanks very much for your attention, and may we all wake up and be free from dukkha.